County Board on this Tuesday, February 20th, 2018. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have one of our members who is applied pursuant to our rules, Section 20-20C2A of the Mclean County Code. Member George Wendt has requested to attend and participate in this meeting remotely. Proper notice was received in accordance with board rules. Is there any objection to Member Wendt attending and participating remotely? Hearing none, then no objection. I deem his request to attend and participate remotely approved. Welcome, George. Morning. I think we have him on.
George, are you on there?
I'm here.
Okay. All right, we're ready to go. We'll have the invocation. Please rise. Member Segoviano.
Our Heavenly Father, once again we call upon you for guidance as we prepare to make decisions for the well-being of the citizens of McLean County. I can't hear very well. Let us be judged by our actions, open, honest, and to do what is right for the individuals and the families that we serve here in McLean County so that they may enjoy a quality of life that is based upon our action. We ask this in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the county clerk please call the roll?
Don Cavallini. Here. Chuck Erickson.
Yes.
George Gordon.
Present.
Mark Johnson.
Yep, right here.
Randall Martin.
Here.
Catherine Metzger.
Present.
Scott Murphy.
Here.
Eric Rankin.
Present.
Carlo Robustelli.
Present.
Susan Schaefer.
Here.
Ryan Scritchlow.
Here.
Paul Segoviano.
Present.
David Seltzer.
Here.
James Solner.
Here.
George Wendt.
Present.
Lori Wolrab. Absent. Josh Barnett.
Present.
Jacob Beard.
Present.
William Casey. John McIntyre.
Here. We have 19 members present and one absent, and we do have a quorum. We'll move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is appearance by members of the public and county employees. And we have a number of people who have signed up to speak this morning. Our McLean County rules state that in public comment in section 20-13G3 that the chair may act to exclude discussion of matters which haven't been previously discussed in a public hearing. I want you to keep in mind that we have determined to allow the public comment today, regardless of the subject matter. On a special use, remember, as board members, you cannot consider any public comment at this time outside the public hearing process or any additional information that might have been provided at this time as well. So you're not to consider anything outside of this testimony, and any such testimony and evidence is considered ex parte and will be proper to base your decision on. Any questions? If not, we'll go ahead to public comments. First person today that spoke up is Mr. Mike Matika.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Board. Just wanted to encourage your support for the energy projects that are before you today. This is economic development for our community. It's not asking for incentives, not asking for rebates, asking for an investment in our community. Just 3 quick points. Number one, we have the possibility to be one of the leaders in Illinois in alternative energy and an energy future with the projects that are taking place in this area. Number two, just as a laborer, we have had 104,000 hours of work on wind farms in McLean County, which has resulted in $4 million in payroll. That's excluding iron workers, operating engineers, other crafts, tenants receiving payment on that. That's $4 million going in the pockets of McLean County citizens. And just you know, a final point, I think we've got a chance to be a real leader here in the community. There's a lot of mythology out there about harmfulness. We've had wind farms in McLean County for a decade now. I would like to find a doctor in town who's had any cases of people with medical problems because of wind farms, and I'd like to find a long list of complaints from people living around the existing wind farms because of many of the things that are being said, particularly about this having a negative impact on schools. I think the school's superintendent in Lexington is very clear, and it should be in your testimony about how favorable this can be for our school systems. Thank you, and thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Eric Elder. Would you please come to the podium? Welcome, Mr. Elder.
Thanks. I'm Eric Elder. I live in Chinoa, and I live in the impacted zone. I've sent you all an email this morning called 5 Good Reasons to Deny the Special Use Permit for this project. Although after I titled it 5 Good Reasons, I remember that's the same thing Lucy said to Linus when she gave him 5 good reasons to do something. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's not my intention with these 5 good reasons. My 5 good reasons to deny this project are related to the Zoning Board's report in which they recommend this project to you on page 264 of your packet, including these. Number 1, this report doesn't even mention this project's effect on property values, one way or another, which is one of the 7 standards which must be met for approval. Number 2, this report doesn't even mention the use and enjoyment of neighbors' properties in terms of their view shed being obstructed both day and night by steel structures which would be taller than anything ever built or seen before in McLean County. Number 3, this report doesn't even mention that insufficient notice has been published about these hearings because the applicant only put their notices in the pantograph, not in the local township papers as outlined by the county code. Number 4, this report doesn't even mention that expert testimony has been discounted regarding the setbacks for these wind turbines, even though the expert who testified was a co-author of the very standards which the Zoning Board has adopted as its standards, making him the most credible expert on this topic in the whole room throughout all the hearings. But the reason this application should be denied the most, and which is the most offensive to me personally, and should be to everyone living in the agricultural district, is number 5. That the Zoning Board of Appeals has posted a quote-unquote agricultural nuisance disclaimer on page 1 of their report, as if wind energy conversion systems somehow fall under the category of quote-unquote commercial agricultural operations as defined by the county code, and that people living in the agricultural districts, farmers included, now have to put up with any and every type of commercial activity from any kind of business to who the Zoning Board chooses to grant a special use permit. An agricultural agreement of any kind does not belong in this document, just like this project, because it fails to meet the standards for a special use permit, does not belong in an agricultural district. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Tim Jolly.
We just got done with our food.
Good morning, and thank you for hearing me this morning. My wife and I would live close to the turbines in this proposed project and the one that's possibly upcoming. The expert testimony and evidence presented by Dr. Schoner has me deeply concerned as to how this project could negatively affect the community where we live. This evidence, consisting of 4 independent, unrelated studies, each came to the same conclusion that the turbine noise should be regulated to no more than 38 to 40 dBA to reduce the amount of high annoyance to an acceptable level. High annoyance was distinguished from general annoyance in that it is continuous, unrelenting irritation which has potential to affect a person's health and well-being. When the opposition presented this, Invenergy, in their arrogance, did not even present any testimony to refute this allegation. In fact, they provided very few studies and very little supporting documentation to substantiate their position on any subject. Rather, no matter if it had been a topic of noise, health, or environmental obligations, they mostly relied on their professional judgment and expert opinion. Then they mostly relied on, with very little support, to provide their burden of proof. They did not provide the burden of proof. When it came to the applicant's requirement to predict the noise emitted on neighboring properties, they again demonstrated their defiance of following the whole law. They reported their predicted noise models at the center of the residence rather than computing the contour maps to show how they comply with regulations on the whole residential property as required by the Illinois Pollution Control Board. They also ignored the federally mandated 2-year eagle nest study, which requires that they look at nests out to 10 miles outside the project boundary. They did not study out to 10 miles. They did this study out to 10 miles the first year, and after finding a nest 4 miles outside the boundary, they illegally narrowed the scope of their survey to the second year of 2 miles outside the boundary. And that excluded the nests they found. They did not meet the requirement, and they had time to. The ZBA knew of all these violations and how they could affect the standards of special use. But they decided to overlook these obvious failures to ensure the applicant would not be overly burdened and could build this project. Do you, as an elected board member, want to be a partner in such an illegal activity, especially when it comes to harming the constituents? Will you, as an elected official, be responsible to uphold the conditions set forth in the standards of special use? Consider the new peer-reviewed expert information demonstrating how the project has the potential to affect the health and welfare of people living in more than 200 homes. In closing, we suggest that you, as prudent members of the county board, reconsider this ill-conceived, hastily developed option that the zoning board and deny this application as it is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I want to remind everyone that the county board rules allow for 3 minutes for each speaker. It is on the screen right up here and behind you as well. And so if you kindly will keep an eye on that while you're speaking, it will help us all. And we'll be as lenient as we think we can be here from the chair as well. Next will be Ms. Barbara Metz.
Good morning. My name is Barb Metz, and I'm directly impacted by this project. I'm here today to respectfully ask each and every one of you to vote no to this Invenergy project. What I've yet to understand is why large landowners' rights are more important than mine. Their desire to make money is directly impacting my property values. Invenergy owns experts admit that a 20% decline in property values is not abnormal in the short term. Since they're asking for 3 years, that's not short term for me who has a house up for sale. When I moved to the country, I took on the risk that my neighbors might want to raise cattle or hogs that bring some unpleasant smells, and an occasional cow pig getting out and damaging my property. The inconvenience of tractors on the roads, dust, fertilizer, etc. Yes, that's the normal stuff I expect living in the country. Wind turbines are not normal agricultural activities. I would venture a guess none of us ever expected that. It's very disturbing that the property I purchased and maintain is losing value because the property or the proposed wind turbine farm. None of us anticipated losing peacefulness, the God-given beauty that miles and miles of nothing but corn and beans present, the wildlife that comes and goes throughout our county. I doubt that any of us bought property hoping to live by a 500-foot wind turbine. We didn't take on that burden knowingly, nor should we be forced to endure the 20 to 30 years of negative consequences so that a few can profit financially. Every property owner has financial obligations, just like the farmer next to us. I, like many people in the footprint of this project, have no experience with the ZBA processes nor the zoning board in general until now. While this isn't an excuse, it's most likely a reality for everyone impacted by the project. By the time we realized what was happening to us, it was too late to adequately prepare a defense. Yes, the ZBA listened, but it didn't really matter. We were told the ZBA process, only expert testimony counts. We aren't experts. We're just innocent people learning in a lesson by a large company who has taken years to prepare and still didn't follow the county rules. They presented no proof, just smoke and mirrors, trying to give everyone a belief that there's no negative impacts, only positive financial gain for everyone. They provided only information that backed their desire and did not follow the Illinois noise pollution laws as required. They took exception to almost every county requirement. These things alone should make you question their business ethics and make you question the information that was used in their models. Please, please think about the citizens of this county who are directly impacted vote no based on the application received and their lack of respect for the written rules. After all, these rules were written to protect each of us in this county. In this situation, there are more non-participants than participants, so protect the masses. Please require a resubmission in order to consider it further. Require Invenergy to follow the written rules. At least that would give citizens of Mclean County an opportunity to present another side of the very clouded picture that we've been given. As board members, you took on the responsibility of preserving and protecting property rights throughout Mclean County. Please do so today by voting no, because every property owner still counts. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Ms. Kimberly Brucker.
Good morning. My name is Kimberly Brucker. My family will be living in the footprint of the Invenergy project that is on your agenda to pass or to deny. I have spoken at the ZBA meetings, as well as sent letters to each and every one of you. There are many reasons that I am concerned about this project. It would appear that numerous laws, guidelines, and rules have been compromised while getting this application to the point that it is at. Noise studies, IDNR recommendations, etc., all of which the ZBA was made aware of. We chose to raise our family in the country on account of the peacefulness of it, the beauty of it, and the safety of it. I could touch upon how every bit of that stands to be taken away from our family and our home, but since my time to speak is limited today, I have one unique circumstance that weighs heavy on my mind. Schertz Aerial Service is my immediate neighbor to the south. Our properties are right next to one another's. Mr. Schertz gave his testimony about the turbines being a potential hazard for him while landing. He educated us on why he must land from the north to the south in the summer due to wind patterns. My home is in his landing path. He literally flies directly over my home, my barn, my cattle pasture, and lands. I'm not going to lie. On any day when I hear him coming, I close my eyes and just pray that all goes as planned for each landing. Now to think about him having to maneuver around additional obstacles frightens me to no end. Invenergy has contacted him and discussed moving some, but the bottom line is they will still be there. I quote his closing statement: "These placement and height modifications may mitigate some risk from the wind turbines at my company's main airstrip." Why is this project so valuable or so important that we're willing to take these risks? I know there has been much discussed about the health and safety of anyone that will be forced to live near these, but how serious is anyone that's making the decisions taking these concerns? From where I sit, so far, it feels like we're talking, we're begging, we're pleading, and no one is listening. I cannot believe there's been enough research or studies on how this really will affect the people that will be forced to live among it. We count on you to protect us and do what's best for us. Will you be able to live with yourself if this causes emotional, mental, physical hardship? or God forbid, the loss of a life to even one person? Or will you do like the ZBA has done and turn the other cheek? I'm asking that you distance yourself from what their opinion is and think for yourself, acknowledge the facts, listen to the people, and make the right decision. Please deny this application, or at the very least, do not rush through it until you have truly had time to consider and research every last aspect of it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Ms. Sarah Emberton. Sarah Emberton here. One more time, is Sarah Emberton here? Okay, thank you. Next will be Ms. Lori Sleater. Thank you. Next will be Mrs. Amy Winterland.
Good morning. My name is Amy Winterland. I am an impacted resident. I've had the pleasure of speaking with a number of you face-to-face, some of you on the phone. I appreciate your time very much. I provided a packet of information to all county board residents, some by email that I couldn't get together with one-on-one. I have a number of concerns, but I only have time to talk about two. Those of you that talk to me realize that I'm most concerned about the wildlife and the environmental issues. So I want to talk about the Henline Creek INAI designation. I want to make sure that you all know I am in possession of a letter from Keith Shank, the Chief Impact Assessment Section Division Chief of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. He has written this letter to Mr. Phil Deck of the Zoning Board. He clearly says the Henline Creek is an integral part of the Mackinac River INAI site. Due to its support of listed mussel species and its high level of aquatic biodiversity, Henline Creek is designated as an INAI site from the Ford County line downstream to its confluence with the Mackinac River mainstream. It was intended that the half-mile setback recommendation apply to Henline Creek, as well as the other features comprising the Mackinac River INAI site. In my haste to submit the recommendations prior to the beginning of these hearings, the recommendation was poorly worded and has been read by many as excluding Henline Creek from the recommendation, and I regret this ambiguity. So he is clearly stating, for the record, that it is a half-mile setback to the Henline Creek. Further, as we chit-chatted, and he gave me a copy of this letter, we talked on the phone. He personally called me to make sure that I knew this. He actually said, by the way, I'm surprised that there's confusion because I talked to Invenergy about this. And I said, really? When was that? In December. The hearing started in January, and yet Invenergy was very confused by this INAI recommendation, which the IDNR makes across all wind farms in Illinois consistently. So with 52 seconds left, I will also mention one other thing that I am surprised about. In my packet, I talked about decommissioning. I said it's a good thing that Department of Agriculture does the agricultural impact mitigation agreement for us, because they have much stricter requirements than our current ordinance does. So I was surprised to see number 7 of the findings of fact of the ZBA says that it would stipulate to follow the financial assurance as submitted in the application beginning 12 years after the start of operations, when the AIMA from the Department of Ag requires 10% financial assurance in year 1, 50% assurance in year 6, and 100% in year 11. And yet again, on page 7, it says beginning on the 12th year of operation. I think that you need to be very careful with this company and the wording that they choose to use. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next will be Ms. Elizabeth Johnston.
Thank you for having me here today. First, I want to echo what Mike Matika said. One of the reasons I wanted to support this is we're facing some economic troubles. We are facing some potential problems in Mclean County, particularly here in the Bloomington-Normal area, and I think it is important that we focus on diversifying our economic base. These alternative energy farms bring in quite a bit of revenue. And then the second point I wanted to make, and I will be brief, I know we're running out of time, is that when my family and I chose to move here, we were very particular about where we moved. And one of the things on our list was clean air. The air quality here is exceptional. Where I lived before, 95% of the days, the air was smudged with brown and gray pollution. It was something that affected me and my family. And since we've moved here, I've not had a single case of bronchitis. So for me, the air quality is something that we can be a leader in Central Illinois by bringing in multiple environmental reasons, making sure that we stay sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Matt James.
Hello, and thank you for your consideration. Today I want to talk about one thing: private property rights. The rights of a farmer to do with his land as he wishes. The view of my property and my business is none of my neighbor's concern. I wanted to become conservative to use the government to cancel private contracts and private land made between two willing parties, especially when the land is zoned and the contract meets all zoning requirements. What's next? Are we going to ban hog farms because of the smell? How about corn because of the pollen pollution? I've heard that we have some of the best soil in the world here, and that is true. God has blessed us with some of the best soil in the world. But I'm here to say it is not my neighbor's concern what I do with that soil. It doesn't belong to them, especially when the half acre is going to produce a steady income stream. We could have a wet year or we could have a dry year. I don't even want to talk about the price of corn lately. I'll say this. We've had people show up from out of town spreading fever dream delusions, misinformation that was quickly put to bed by the ZBA who voted 7-0 and positive approval. They lived in reality, and I hope the board see the terrible precedent set when telling farmers what they can and can't do with their land. I would ask you to vote in favor and keep landowner rights intact. Thank you for your time again.
Thank you. Our last speaker today is Mr. Evan Lamensdorf.
I am here today to ask you to vote yes to the proposed wind farm. A yes today is a yes to secure our local schools. This project offers $42 million in payments to our local schools. Lexington in particular would receive up to $25 million over the next 30 years. With the state change in school funding formula, Lexington would get a bonus of $2.6 million in the first 2 years, and even with the adjustment in the EAV, they would see an extra $600,000 a year. This is a city who had to pass a tax increase referendum just to keep from consolidating school districts. Over the past couple years, they were forced to cut business and home economics. This project would secure the future of Lexington schools. Please vote yes for our schools, for new jobs, and please vote yes to millions in economic impact in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. That includes appearance by members of the public today. We'll move on to item number 6, which is our consent agenda. You all have it before you. What say you?
I move be approved as presented.
Motion to move and approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there by Member Segoviano, second by Member Schaefer? Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. We have no resolutions today, this time. I need to go back and ask, is there any dissenting votes? On item D, that's a transfer ordinance that requires 2/3 vote. Is anybody voting against it this time? Wants to have the vote recorded? If not, we'll move on. Motion was approved. We'll move on to the report of our standing committees. Executive Committee, Vice Chairman Zollner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Executive Committee has 2 items for action today. The first one is 7A1A, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2018 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance General Fund 001, County Board 001 for the coroner. Requires a 2/3 vote. I make that motion.
Motion by member Solner, second by member Selzer. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anybody want their vote recorded as dissenting? If not, the motion carries.
All right, the next item is 7A1B. Recommend that the county board make a determination that the need for confidentiality still exists to the minutes of closed sessions of the county board and its committees. Comes from the administration. I so move.
Motion by member Solner, second by member Cavallini. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move on to the report of our Justice Committee Chair, Member Gordon. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Justice Committee brings one item for action this morning, item B1A, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2018 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance, the Court Automation Fee Fund 0140 through the Circuit Clerk's Office 0015, found on page 248 in our packet, and I'll move that.
Motion by member Gordon, second by member Casely. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? This requires 2/3 vote. Any dissenting votes to be recorded. If none, the motion carries.
Our further information can be found in the unapproved minutes, pages 9 through 12, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to item C, report of the Finance Committee, Chairman Selzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee brings no items for action at this meeting. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to the report of the Health Committee, Chair Member Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health Committee brings no items for action today, and our general report can be found on pages 19 through 23 of the unapproved minutes packet.
Thank you. We'll move on to the report of the Transportation Committee, Chairman Casely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Transportation Committee brings no items for action, and our general report is found on pages 24 through 28 of the unapproved minutes, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll move on to item F, Land Use and Development Committee, Chairman Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item on the agenda is item F1A, approve the request of Aerosmith One Solar LLC by Cypress Creek Renewables in case SU-18-03 on parcel 24-14-300-006. It is requesting a special use to allow a solar power generating facility in the agriculture district on property located in Aerosmith Township, immediately north of 1100 North Road, approximately 2/5 of a mile east of 3400 East Road. And I so move.
Motion by member Erickson. Is there a second? Second by member Segoviano. Comments or questions? Member Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find it interesting that we're being considered an area for solar because, as you can see, there's very, we have a cloudy day today. Although I did attend the hearings, so I listened to all of this, and I actually went back and listened to it again when I was trying to evaluate this. And what I'm going to say is going to apply for all three of these solar farms, and also a little bit on the wind farm. But my biggest concern is that this is prime farmland. This is what McLean County is. We are farmland. We produce crops. And if you looked at the pictures that were with the presentation, it doesn't look like you could return this farmland back into farmland in this project, or all of these solar projects. And one of the things that was said is that this is temporary, but it was 40 years. Now, to me, temporary is not 40 years. 2 or 3 years maybe, but not 40. That's over a generation of that. We are agriculture. Did we not just a few months ago welcome a $1 billion company that wants to grow to $5 billion company that's all agriculture, farming, you know, crop type things? That is what I believe we are. And all of these properties on these, on the solar farms, they're very high value for crops. I understand the markets aren't good. Markets go up and down, and they have been since the beginning. And so I cannot support this, and thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Metzger.
I have to also agree with Member Schaefer that these solar farms are only bringing in 2 megawatts of energy for 40 to 60 acres out of production. In the Mclean County Regional Comprehensive Plan, which is constantly being brought up, in Chapter 7 it says, land resources included in the region's farm ground is one of the region's greatest resources for its vast amounts of farmland, much which is prime and among the most fertile in the entire world. So by taking 60 to 40 acres out of production, and this land has the LESA scores of over 230 out of 300, which basically means it's very productive. It seems to be in conflict to the Mclean County Regional Plan that's in Chapter 7. So I'm confused how we can continue to have these plans and ignore them. In addition, one of the comments are on the findings of fact, number 7. They have indicated that they're going to encourage putting grasses and pollination in the in between these large solar panels. And these native grasses, they encourage native grasses and pollinators. The problem with this is if you follow the pollinator fields as of the USDA, they require that there are certain weeds that are considered invasive species have to be manually pulled. So if these solar companies put in pollinators, they're going, or any grass, they need to make sure that they are pulling these invasive species so it doesn't invade the rest of their neighbors' fields. So it would impact other people. In addition, the USDA pollinator fields require the burn every 3 years. I don't think they're going to be able to burn around these solar panels. So I just cannot understand why we would take ground out of production and then try to indicate that we're going to have pollinator fields when I'm not sure that they have any intention of going out and manually pulling invasive weeds to make sure that they don't impact the adjacent property.
Other comments or questions? Member Solder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to speak today in favor of these, all 3 of these solar farms. They're all 3 in my district. I know that the majority of the citizens in my district that I've spoke to are in favor of it. In fact, there's many of them that are very excited about it. My initial concerns were the county and the highway roads. It appears that very little concrete or gravel will be used for these, mainly just for where they set their transformers. The majority of the rest of the construction will be steel, which will be driven into the ground. So when it comes to decommissioning, it'll just be a matter of taking the solar cells down and pulling out the framework. So that's, those are a couple issues that I was concerned about, but I'm not at this point. I think it goes back to property owner rights. Again, these farmers own the property. In my mind, should have an opportunity to generate extra income from other counties. I've heard that income could be substantially more than what it would be if they were raising a crop. And the other thing is that the government currently has different conservation programs, set-aside programs. These farmers, if they met the requirements, could put this property all out for conservation use right now. So to me, after 40 years, I realize that's a long time, but the soil will be able to go back to what it was designed for, which was growing crops. Plus it will have been rested for 40 years. So again, there's no major impact on any of the neighbors. I just think there's too many win-wins. It's going to employ a large number of people, and I like the idea of us being in the forefront of green energy in the county. So I'm going to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Cavallini.
I've had the unique experience of visiting a place in Florida called Babcock Ranch. It is being constructed literally out of the pinewood scrubs in Charlotte County, and it will be the first all-solar city, I think it's certainly in the state of Florida and maybe in the entire United States. It's a rather amazing project to see not just 20 acres, but many more acres of panels supporting buildings, homes. My wife and I were sitting underneath a solar tree that was next to this fountain, and I was looking at it and more closely. I said, my gosh, that fountain is lighted. You didn't notice it during the day, but it's lighted, and the power's coming from these solar trees. There obviously is a place for solar. I don't know if it's here in Illinois. Although I can tell you that you can get a sunburn on a cloudy day in Florida if you're not careful. So there obviously must be power coming through. If the company feels that this is an investment that they feel they're worth taking a risk on, maybe it's not a bad idea. But you'll find solar certainly in Florida, but I still have some reservations about how effective it is in Illinois, especially on cloudy days.
Thank you. Are there other comments or questions? Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that's going to be said probably in other parts of this agenda that the Land Use and Development Committee has, that private property rights are private property rights, but they're not absolutes. If they were absolute, you wouldn't have to apply for a special use permit. You wouldn't have to apply for a variance. So private property rights are not absolute. They are to be balanced in consideration with everybody's rights out there. On the solar farms, I'm not so sure that they are injurious to other landowners. So I think that consideration is one of the findings of fact that the zoning board has to make. And I think that on those grounds that I think I can support it, but I'm not supporting it on the grounds that private property rights are absolute. That's just not true. It's never been true in the history of jurisprudence. You don't have an absolute right to do whatever you want, whenever you want with property. That's why we have zoning codes. People buy property, there's easements and covenants that run with the land, utility lines run over your property. While private property rights are to be given much weight and a lot of respect, I don't think we should ever consider them to be absolute. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other comments or questions? Member Casely.
About a year ago now, I had occasion to visit the only solar farm that is presently in operation in Illinois, and that's in Otter Creek Township in LaSalle County. And it consists of 120 acres It is fenced with a cyclone fence, and it has vegetative screening around the exterior of the fence. The solar arrays are mounted upon steel racks, which are anchored into the ground by steel stakes that are driven into the ground and could be easily pulled up at the time of decommissioning. The decommissioning does not appear to be much of a problem with respect to solar arrays because the value of the solar collectors is in excess of the cost of removing them, so that there would be value to anybody who wanted to decommission a solar array. I went up to LaSalle County to look at this because there are certain members of my family that want to put one on our farm, and I have been outvoted and we're going to go ahead. So, but I'm not necessarily happy about it, and it would perhaps please me if the Zoning Board of Appeals in this other county were to deny that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I just, maybe this is more directed at the state's attorney. The questions, since we're going to do this multiple times, my understanding is that when we ask questions or speak on behalf of each of these individual cases, that the conversation should confine itself specifically to what was spoken in testimony at the ZBA. And while these personal stories are interesting, they are, I think that even opens up some level of liability later on. And I think that we should confine our testimony specifically to what was discussed at the ZBA. Am I correct?
You're correct that your vote is supposed to be based on what is in the record.
Okay. And so, and that's why I'd say, I mean, I'm trying to, I like the personal quips and the personal stories, but I think that we should confine ourselves specifically to what was done at the ZBA.
Thank you, Member Rankin. Duly noted. Remember, your vote is based on what was testified at the zoning board hearings. Thank you. Member Metzger, you're around too.
I agree with Member Rankin. I just want to be sure I attended all of the hearings, and all of my comments are based on what was presented in the hearings, and will continue to be that way.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? You have before you on the floor a motion to vote on this. I'm going to call the question. At this time, I'm going to take a voice vote unless there's an objection. If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. So we have one recorded no vote. Mr. Wendt? No. More than one?
George, was that a no or a yes?
That was a yes.
Okay.
I thought he said no.
He said aye, but it was just late.
I understand. Let's take a roll call vote. Thank you.
Don Cavallini?
Yes.
Chuck Erickson? George Gordon?
Yes.
Mark Johnson?
Yes.
Randall Martin?
Yes.
Catherine Metzger? No. Scott Murphy?
Yes.
Eric Rankin?
Yes.
Carlo Robustelli? Yes. Susan Schaefer?
No.
Ryan Scritchlow?
Yes.
Paul Segabiano?
Yes.
And David Seltzer?
Yes.
James Solner?
Yes.
George Wendt?
Yes.
Josh Barnett?
Yes.
Jacob Beard?
Yes.
William Casely? Yes. You voting, Mr. Chairman?
No.
Okay.
We have 16 votes for yes and 2 no votes. Motion has carried. We'll move on. Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Would it be prudent for me just to move the two together, F1B and F1C? Do you want me to separate
I
them?
would probably rule that we should go ahead and separate them.
All right. All right.
Because they're different areas
I'll do it
of
that
land.
way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Land Use and Development Committee brings item F1B, approve the request of Aerosmith 2 Solar LLC by Cypress Creek Renewables in case SU-18-04 on parcel 24-14-400-002. It is requesting a special use to allow a solar panel generating facility in the agriculture district on property located in Aerosmith Township, immediately north of 1100 North Road, approximately 3/5 of a mile east of 3400 East Road. And I so move.
Motion by Chairman Erickson. Is there a second? Second by Member Murphy. Comments or questions? Any comments? Any questions? Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question comes out of left field. I don't know that it could be answered off the top of anybody's head, but maybe somebody knows it way better than I do. I'm just wondering how many acres of tillable land there are in McLean County at this point in time. We talk about land being committed to uses such as a solar farm. These are, if I'm not mistaken, the first applications we've seen in the county for solar farms. Regardless of the disposition today on these, we've already approved one. There may well be additional applications. I'm just wondering what our total resources are in terms of available farm land as a form of context to this discussion and any that may come down the road later on.
I do not have that answer. I'm not sure staff does. Member Gordon, we have the largest downstate county. We can figure square miles. I don't know if somebody from the Farm Bureau or Illinois Agriculture Association might have that figure in front of us. That could be something that we can follow through for you and find out. Member Solner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have the answer to that, but I will say one of the issues that we're going to face in the future with solar power or wind power is the capacity of the transmission lines. It's going to get to a point where there will be no more capacity on those lines without some major improvements. So although, if it was voted to cover every acre of the county on wind or solar, we couldn't handle that. But it is something to consider, I think, in the future.
Thank you. Got to remind everyone we need to make our comments and questions pertaining to what was provided for us in the hearings again. And Member Erickson, back to you.
That was just what I was going to say. If we're going to ask questions to get facts that were outside the hearings, and we're going past what you originally asked us to consider. So,
thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Any other comments or questions? If none, I think we'll have a voice vote again. Or I'm sorry. Roll call vote.
Don Cavallini? Yes. Chuck Erickson?
Yes.
George Gordon? Yes. Mark Johnson?
Yes.
Randall Martin?
Yes.
Catherine Metzger? No. Scott Murphy? Yes. Eric Rankin? Yes. Carla Robustelli? Susan Schaefer? No. Ryan Scritchlow? Yes. Paul Segabiano?
Yes.
David Seltzer? Yes. James Soldner?
Yes.
George Wendt?
Yes.
Josh Barnett?
Yes.
Jacob Beard?
Yes.
William Casely?
Yes.
16-2.
16 in favor, 2 no votes, and the motion has carried. We'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Land Use and Development Committee brings item F1C, Moraine Solar LLC by Cypress Creek Renewables in case SU-18-05 on parcel 29-10-200-005. It is requesting a special use to allow a solar-powered generating facility in the agriculture district on property located in Downs Township, immediately west of 2200 East Road, approximately 3/5 of a mile north of 600 North Road. And I so move.
Motion by Member Erickson, second by Member Scritchlow. Comments or questions? If not, I'll call a question. We'll have a roll call vote.
Don Cavallini? Yes. Chuck Erickson?
Yes.
George Gordon? Yes. Mark Johnson?
Yes.
Randall Martin?
Yes.
Catherine Metzger? No. Scott Murphy?
Yes.
Eric Rankin?
Yes.
Carla Robustelli? Yes. Susan Schaefer? No. Ryan Scritchlow?
Yes.
Paul Segabiano?
Yes.
David Seltzer? Yes. James Solner?
Yes.
George Wendt?
Yes.
Josh Barnett?
Yes.
Jacob Beard?
Yes.
William Casely? Yes. 16-2.
16 votes for yes and 2 no votes, and the motion is carried. Member Casely, do you have a question?
Kankakee County has a comprehensive solar farm ordinance, and I think that maybe we ought to take a look at that and see if we ought to enact.
We can't do it on this discussion now after we took the vote. Thank you.
I understand that, but I think that we should look at it.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on, Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Land Use and Development Committee brings item F1D, approve the request of McLean County Wind Energy, LLC by Invenergy Wind Development North America, LLC, in case SU-17-11, for a special use to allow a wind energy conversion system wind farm on approximately 13,000 acres in the Agriculture District on property located in Chenoa, Gridley, Lawndale, Lexington, and Money Creek Townships. The project is generally located east of County Highway 29, south of U.S. Highway 24, west of County Roads 3570 East and 3600 East, and north of State Highway 165. Mr. Chairman, as chairman of the Land Use Committee, it's my job to present the item, but I am not going to move for it.
A motion by Member Robustelli. Is there a second? Second by Member Segoviano. Comments or questions? No comments at this time. Member Cavallini.
I've given a lot of thought to this, and I would like to take the liberty to indulge the board in my thinking and my reaction to this. I've been on the board now for almost 16 years, and I don't know in that period of time, in the total amount of time, that I've talked maybe more than an hour in that period. So please indulge me as I really want to share, I guess, my heart with you today. In nearly 16 years as a McLean County board member, I have observed that questions of zoning always seem to be the most contentious, and none more so than gravel pits and wind farms. Is it little wonder that we find ourselves in the middle of a topic that always sees plenty of debate, deliberation, and discussion. Before we proceed with issuing any zoning permit for any new wind farms seeking to do business in McLean County, we must exercise our collective wisdom, knowledge, and values to make the best possible decision for all of our constituents we serve. That will require careful, thoughtful, and insightful discussion. While we will not always agree on the final outcome, I believe we can agree to conduct the discussion in depth, utilizing the esprit de corps that we have shown to each other over and over again, no matter what the topic. As matters now stand for me, I cannot, in good conscience, agree to vote for the proposal before us, passed by the Zoning Board of Appeals. They did an excellent job conducting the hearings and providing a platform for both sides to state their positions. But the final and binding decision as to the direction we take rests with us, the elected representatives of McLean County residents. In general, I support clean energy, and I voted for both wind farms that are now in operation. And initially, I supported Invenergy when they came into Lexington, set up their office on Main Street, and held a number of public information programs introducing residents to their long-range plans. I made it a point to visit, listen, and learn from their representatives. The first thing I learned was that their planned wind turbines would be significantly larger in scale than the ones I voted to approve some years ago. There seems to be no end to technological advancements. Invenergy's new turbines call for a height of 499 feet from the tip of the blade to the ground. The next wind company is also asking to set up shop in the county, plans for their turbines to be even taller. I cannot help but wonder if there is a limit to how high tall turbines can be constructed. I recall mentioning to one of Invenergy's representatives, now almost 2 years ago, that since these new state-of-the-art turbines were larger and could produce more power than their older versions, the company would not need as many to produce the same amount of energy as previous models. Consequently, I find it interesting that one wind farm company is asking for 55 new and enhanced turbines, and the other for 118 of the new and supersized models. That would give us a combined 173 new turbines constructed around newer and more advanced technology, leaving a giant footprint across our agricultural areas. But what prompted me to change my initial decision? I find myself in a singular situation now that Invenergy has been permitted to erect 9 turbines in the security safety setback zone that surrounds the city of Lexington, and for that matter, all cities. The company originally wanted up to 18 turbines in that zone, in the zone established by state law. After 2 very divisive votes, the first resulted in a rejection of all 18, and the second, which resulted in a compromise to accept 9, the company has been allowed to intrude into the setback zone. I feel like the city just got a gift of a Trojan horse. Not 1, but 9. Frankly, I was not even sure I could address this issue or even vote on this proposal before us because I have been placed quite unexpectedly by events in the center of the debate. I was telling my wife, I said, just a couple days ago I was sitting in a hot tub in Florida, and now I feel like I'm in a hot seat up here in Illinois. I'd rather be in the hot tub. Therefore, I have sought the advice from our state's attorney. Clearly, while I have a personal vested interest, I do not have a conflict of interest. Mr. Chambers was very clear in helping me to understand the difference, so I feel free to speak and to vote. The city will receive additional revenue from the company for permitting the turbines into the setback zone, but I believe that there will be consequences in the future that would be detrimental to the growth of not only the city, but also the school district. If the city reduces the opportunity for new subdivisions to be developed anywhere, there will be fewer families moving into town. I taught for 34 years at Lexington High School. My wife and I have lived in Lexington since 1969. It is a community that I am proud to be a part of. But since the ZBA gave its blessing to the company, I have heard from individuals that I know personally who attend church with me, who said they will consider moving out of town because of the changing landscape, the environmental impacts, and the likelihood of reduced property and home values these giant turbines will have on the rural area. Since the ZBA decision, I have received quite a number of emails, and I'm sure many of you have too, concerning the proposed wind farm. While in Florida, I've kept a log beginning with the first letter I received on February 10th, 2018. From that date until January 15th, I've personally received 12 personally written letters, not form letters, each one opposed to the current proposal. Then on January 10th, I received 19 letters, each identical, from residents outside of the wind farm area who live primarily in Bloomington and Normal, but some as far away as Oak Lawn and Crystal Lake, Illinois, all in favor of the proposed wind farm project. Next, from February 12th until as late as February 17th, I received an additional 7 letters, personally written, stating their opposition to the proposed wind farm. I also received 2 letters from union leaders based out of town who stressed the importance of jobs and the project that the project would create. Curiously, I never received any letters of support for the project from participating landowners. It is so difficult to separate facts from facts when reviewing the testimony provided. During the public testimony, experts were called on to testify, first on one topic and then next on another topic. That was followed by experts challenging each other on the facts concerning sound levels, decibels, flicker effect, bird and bat kills, and whatever. We seem to be dealing with multiple layers of facts, but whose facts are correct? Sometimes I believe that whenever we face large issues like we are today, we should turn to the people directly and place these large-scale issues on the ballot and provide the opportunity for them to vote either in an advisory or binding referendum. But we don't currently have that option. Therefore, I believe we need to work together, giving ourselves more time to find creative ways to compensate the non-participating property owners who have lived in this area for years, decades, long before the turbines have arrived, seeking direction from each other, brainstorming for new ideas to approach this issue that will give us flexible ways to solve this dilemma. From my perspective, the proposal lacks balance. As a board, we must find a way to bring some equity, fairness, and goodwill into this picture. Consequently, I move that we hit the pause button. Allow some time to think about this, to put our best minds together and ideas, and to come up with a solution, one that most people can live with, one that will offer good jobs for our local workers, one that provides revenue to our schools. And tell me a school district that doesn't need revenue. And county, one that provides revenues for participating farmers, power to our cities, one that finds way to compensate non-participating property owners, and yes, a fair profit margin for the wind companies. There must be a better way so that everyone can feel positive about what we are doing, not only for today, but for tomorrow. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you, Member Cavallini. Are you making a motion at this time?
I will move that we table the motion that is we're presently considering.
Okay, you're tabling it to a date certain?
When you mean a date certain, do we pick that date
Table
now?
to take it up again in the next month or not?
It will table to a date certain.
All right. It's been a motion by Member Cavallini to table this resolution till a date certain of next month, I suspect, right? You have to clarify for me.
I would like to do it in April if possible. To April?
Motion by Member Cavallini to table
Chairman,
this.
point of order, Chairman.
Point of order? Go ahead, sir.
We're voting on tabling something that hasn't been brought forth by Member Erickson. I thought his motion was.
We did have a
forward.
resolution on the floor by Member.
That's fine.
Member
I just want to make sure that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're okay with that. Is there a second to the motion to table? There's a second by Member Erickson for a motion to table until the April meeting. Any comments or questions on the motion? Do we have clarification from staff? We're all right.
I'm going to defer to Jessica Woods, Civil First Assistant, on this since she handled the ZBA hearing.
What was the question? The implication.
The impact that it's going to have on delaying it.
The main impact that I see on this is that the statute requires that there be a county board vote on this issue within 30 days of the public hearings. So if you table it until April, you'll just have to reopen the public hearings and redo that public hearing process. That would also trigger a publication requirement as well.
Other comments or questions on the motion to table? Members Murphy.
If we have to do a publication, what are the costs to the county that will incur if we table this to April?
I'll refer to staff on that question.
I believe the cost of publication was approximately $18,000.
Other comments or questions? Member Schaefer.
To follow up on that, is that not paid for by the applicant?
I think our review has determined that that would be the county's responsibility at this point.
Member Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple things. First off, I want to make sure I understand this would not require a new application by the applicant or a new testimony by the applicant, the experts, and it just would be the people that wanted to testify.
Yeah.
Everything that's already in the record is, I can't remember who asked the question. Everybody who that's on the record is still going to be in the record, but it would have to be open up for a public hearing with public comment again.
And then I guess my other question is, in 2 months, I'm not sure what we will know that we don't know now. As far as, are we going to, is the applicant going to come up with some other kind of agreement with non-participating landowners? I guess I don't understand what the delay would do, and maybe Member Cavallini can enlighten me on that.
Thank you. Member Cavallini. I'll give you time to respond to this.
I don't have a written speech.
Okay. I don't have any more either now. Yes, I think that delaying this will allow us as a board to form a committee if we need to and put our heads together to come up with a plan that will somehow compensate the non-participating landowners. Everybody seems to win. I like the fact that there's new jobs for people. I like the fact that there's more money for the schools. I like the fact that there's more money coming into the county coffers. Maybe if we had the money, we wouldn't have to have done what we did last month, and that is encourage early retirement and shuffle people around. But the one person or the one group and the farmers are doing well. I applaud them. Wonderful. But the one group that doesn't seem to come out here are the people who have lived in this area for years. What are they going to gain? They see this as a huge negative. Right or wrong, I'm no judge. I don't know enough to understand the complexity of these wind towers and the larger ones. What are the ramifications? I'm hoping that we could come together. We formed committees before to study this and say, okay, here's a plan that we can compensate non-participating landowners. That's what I'm asking for. It's time to come up with something that is going to be better for everybody.
Member Cavallini, if a committee was formed in the next week or two, would you be willing to serve on it?
Yes.
All right. Member Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. This tabling motion really denies each and every member of this board an opportunity to discuss this issue. Mr. Cavallini has not been here on a monthly basis like most of us have, and I think this tabling motion would deny us, all 20 of us, the opportunity to fully vent this application. And I'm here prepared today to do that. I think there's a lot at stake here, and his tabling motion does a disservice, not only those who are for it, but those who are against it. And I hope that this thing does not stand its ground.
Thank you. I believe we had 30 days to rule on this, or it goes back to ZBA, and it would go back to a public hearing. We wouldn't have a way that we could form a committee at that time as well. Anyone else that has, Member Schaefer?
I'm not sure if by tabling it and what Mr. Cavallini was suggesting, if we can actually change the rules in the middle of what we're doing here. I'm not sure how we can do that and force someone to do something that's not been in the rules and, you know, changing the rules of the game?
Again, we'd have to base our vote on the proceedings that went on in the ruling of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that's where we are at this time. Member Robustelli?
Mr. Chairman, it just, one thing I want to just check in with our state attorney on. We are debating on a motion to table, and so we can discuss things that are related to that.
That's what
procedure and information.
Absolutely.
That's acceptable. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So it seems to me, I don't understand the rationale to table this with, if I understood Member Cavallini's argument, to allow us to form a committee to come up with a plan to compensate non-participating landowners. It seems to me we have a few options. One is to vote on it, and each of us has the right to vote yes or no. The other is to refer it back to the ZBA with a specific question that we would like them to consider further about the actual testimony that came before us, or to vote for it. I mean, I think that's the three options, if I understand them correctly. And so I'm having a hard time. I'm very sympathetic to your impassioned presentation. I'm sympathetic to the issues that have been raised, but procedurally, I'm struggling because this board spent a considerable amount of time back in November of 2016 and prior to that, looking at revising the special use permit project for this particular use. We debated it, we discussed it, we changed the specific setbacks, we took input from the public, and so the ZBA has done exactly what we've asked of them. They've evaluated the proposal based on the ordinance that was put in place that we approved, and so I will not support tabling this in this ambiguous way, because I don't understand how it moves us forward one way or the other. I think if there was a more narrow objection and you were looking at sending it back to the ZBA for further deliberation because you objected to some of the testimony or some of the information, that would be one thing. But I'm not hearing that. What I'm hearing is you don't support the project, which is your right, and I think we should be able to vote on that today. So that's where I stand.
Thank you very much. I think at this time, for a point of clarification, I'm going to refer to legal counsel. Member Chambers.
I'm sorry, Ms. Woods and I are sharing a microphone up here. I want to clarify what you said with referring it back to the ZBA. That would make it so then you guys could vote on it again at a later date. If you table it until March, your vote at that point, yes or no, either way, would be beyond the 30 days required by statute. You wouldn't be able to do that. So tabling it effectively, just so you know procedurally, tabling it until March, you can't vote at that point. If you want to vote in March, you have to send it back to the ZBA. That being said, there is the motion at this point with a second to table.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the motion to table? Yeah, Member Rankin.
Point of clarification, the motion was to table to April.
That's correct.
So
yes.
that would also kill
Member
it.
Chambers was using an example of March being overtime as well. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? There's a motion on the floor. Member Erickson.
As I understand, Member Robustelli, he would want to, if we're going to do a tabling motion, he'd want a more specific motion as to what we would be sending it back to ZBA for, if we were going to be doing something like that.
I think excuse me. I think the clarification that was made is the fact that if we did table it, we would have to go back to ZBA.
Yeah, but I think Member Robustelli is contending that what are we sending it back to ZBA for if we don't send it with instructions? I mean, I think that's what he's saying. I mean, there has to be some instructions.
All right, thank you.
Actually, just to be clear, if I understood, what I was saying is if we vote to table it, not only are we not sending it back to the ZBA, but we're also not giving any direction as to why we're doing it. But just to be clear, if I understood our state attorney, the motion on the table would not be sending it back to ZBA. It would simply be to end any further consideration of this item moving forward. And so that's what, that was what I was trying to clarify. It seemed like there was another interest here, but that isn't going to be accomplished, this special committee
I think we're confusing the issue, and I understand your dialogue going on. One follow-up, please, and then we're going to call a question.
I mean, the follow-up on the thought is, I mean, what can we send it back to ZBA for? What's permissible to sending it back to ZBA to do? What can we do from here? That's the question.
Point of order, could we discuss that after we discuss the tabling? I mean, we're either going to table it or not. Then we can talk about if we're sending it back or voting on it.
Well, the reason I'm asking now is...
Mr. Chambers, this time.
I think if you're just tabling it, then it's just, you guys just bring it back and there's nothing done on it between now and then. If you want it for further clarification, then it needs to be sent, you need to be referring it back to the ZBA.
I understand that. My question is, I mean, can we amend the tabling motion to send it back with specific instructions to the ZBA? If we amended the, let's say we withdraw the tabling motion.
That's not tabling.
That's not tabling.
I understand that. But can we withdraw the tabling motion? Can we withdraw it and then make another motion to send it back to ZBA with instructions?
One moment, please. Okay.
If the person who made the second and the person who made the motion both do that, then yes.
So a motion to withdraw, a member who made the motion to withdraw is different than tabling as well. Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope that I can maybe, well, in asking and answering some questions here, maybe I can get clarified, get some clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct, and I'll direct this to Mr. Chambers if I may, am I correct, Mr. Chambers and Ms. Woods, am I correct that a motion to table is in effect blocking a motion to refer back to ZBA? We can't, they're not the same thing, and we can't be dealing with two motions at once. So
interpretation of it.
All right. So that, following from that, it would require, it would be necessary for Member Cavallini, and I'm sorry, I forgot who seconded the motion, for them to withdraw, Member Erickson, to withdraw the motion to table, in effect to clear the floor so that we may then consider what we want to do instead. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. I couldn't have said it any better myself. That's exactly what we would have to do. We'd have to withdraw it, and we have to give some clarification if we want to send it back to ZBA, what in the hell we're sending it back for.
Quorum here the best that we can with this situation as well. The motion was made on the floor by Member Cavallini. Do you have would you like to withdraw your motion at this time? If not, we'll move on and take a vote on it. Well, I'm asking you right now, sir, if you'd like to withdraw.
I'd like to have him talk first before I make a
You relinquish your time to Member Segoviano. Go ahead.
You know, I think this tabling motion, in my opinion, is nothing more than a delaying tactic and to kill this. I think we should vote down the tabling motion and get into full discussion this board is elected to do, and that is to vote it up or down. But this delaying tactic is nothing more than to kill it. That's why Mr. Cavallini is here, and I take exception to that.
Again, I ask Member Cavallini, do you want to withdraw your motion, or shall we pursue and take a vote?
First off, I'd like to respond to Mr. Segoviano's comment. I'm not here to kill this plan, okay? I'm here for us to consider ways to make it better so that everyone can come out a winner. Everybody seems to be a winner except for the non-participating landowners. There shouldn't be, if this is a good plan, everybody should win. We should go away from this meeting today feeling positive about what we have done for the entire county, for Lexington, for McLean County, for the workers, for the farmers, for everyone. If we leave here and we can't feel that, then we really need to think about what we're doing. And so I would be willing to withdraw what I've stated, to table it, to send it back to the ZBA, if I knew that we could come out with a better plan. So
I can't, either you withdraw your motion or you don't, sir.
I will withdraw my motion for tabling it.
Thank you. Members, second for the motion, Member Erickson?
I think the member is asking for legal guidance, and if he wants to send it back to ZBA, what can he ask for?
He's either going to withdraw his motion or he's not going to withdraw it. You were the second for the motion. Will you withdraw your second for the motion?
I know, I'd like to have my question answered.
What is it that your question is? He's seeking legal guidance. I thought that he just had legal guidance. I'll refer back to Member Chambers.
ZBA can continue the public hearing process.
All right, but can he say, can I send it back to have you consider the decibel levels? Can I have you send it back to consider
Yes.
the setback levels? Can I have you send it back to consider?
You can send it back with direction.
Okay.
Send it back with directions.
I will withdraw my motion. I will withdraw the second.
Thank you. The second has been withdrawn. Is there other discussion on the floor about the original motion? Still on the round of debate. If anybody has other discussion, if not, we'll call a question. Member Beard.
What is it?
The original motion is in your packet by Member Robustelli, which is item D on your packet. No. There's been no motion to send it back. There was a motion to table which was withdrawn.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Then are we back on the original motion?
Yes, we are.
If I could speak to the original motion.
You may.
Thank you. You know, first of all, we all received a number of letters and emails, and I think we can certainly appreciate those individuals taking the time to express their viewpoints. However, not only myself, but every member of this board is obligated to vote on the facts that were presented in sworn testimony. That is our duty, that is our responsibility. I think when we look at the facts, what we have to consider is the Zoning Board of Appeal. Those are individuals that we, the county board, appointed due to their honesty, their integrity, and their willingness to serve. 7 hearings, 30 hours of testimony, sworn testimony. That committee took 2.5 hours to deliberate that information, dissect that information, and after 2.5 hours deliberation, they came up with a unanimous vote. Not to injure anybody, but to give credence to the application and the process they followed. Not only did they spend 2.5 hours delivering the facts, they added 16 stipulations to the company in order to protect those people in that area. We have 2 wind farms here currently in McLean County. I checked with our zoning officer. There has not been one written formal complaint in regards to the noise of the operation of those wind farms. There's been a lot said. In fact, I was driving down Veterans Parkway last night, and we talk about the flickering of lights, how it's going to affect us. Anybody ever drive down Veterans Parkway at night and see the lights that you're encountering flickering? Or someone sitting home watching television as the commercials come on, a program kind of flickering? I mean, how far a reach do we go with that? I think we appointed these people to the Zoning Board of Appeal once again because of their honesty and their integrity and they're willing to serve. How many of us here sitting here today would spend 30 hours in those chairs, listen to sworn testimony, and come up with any other conclusion what they did? I appreciate their service. I think we should all appreciate their service, and I think we owe them a due respect by passing this unanimous vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there other comments or questions on the original motion? Member Schaefer, we're still in round 1. I'll let you know how we're doing here with the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did attend the hearings, and the ones that I couldn't attend, I listened to, and I also read all the transcripts. So I've spent a lot of time on this issue. I have a list of about a dozen items here, which I'm not going to talk about every one of them because I think other people may be talking about them, at least not in round 1. So I will pick out a few that you know, resonated with me the most. The first one is the issue of the agricultural nuisance disclaimer. I am very disappointed that that is being used as an excuse, because one of the things that it says is to build. People don't always build a new home, so are they being told that they have this nuisance if they purchase a home? When we go back to the gravel pit, that was something that the realtors had to tell the residents or the potential buyers of homes. And I can tell you that it did impact those people that were trying to sell their homes. And so in the short term, yes, there was impact for those people, because there was the uncertainty for all that time that we were going through all those, the ZBA process and whatnot. So this is, with this one, you know, they want 3 years versus 2, you know, so that's more uncertainty for these homeowners. So I do want to say that I have seen that effect. So I really think that the agricultural nuisance disclaimer that's being used as an excuse should not be used as an excuse, at least for the people who did not build their home. One of the other things that I noticed by listening to both the applicant, especially the applicant, oftentimes there were non-answers or evasive answers. And then there were times that they would say they'd get back to you or whatever. And there were things that they didn't want to do. And their answers reflected that, especially in the issues about the IDNR set codes and recommendations from IDNR that is actually in our statute or our code. And so here you have a company that comes in and they don't want to follow the code. And the same thing with putting turbines, you know, placement around Lexington and Chenoa and Gridley or wherever they did it. You know, it's like, okay, I'm just going to put my turbines here. I want my turbines here. You know, I'm not going to listen to your code. I don't want to follow the instructions unless you're going to force me to do this. And I really have a hard time believing that, and the stipulations that some of the ZBA put on there, and I really do appreciate the work that they did. They had to listen, they listened to a lot. They were very, very patient with everyone that wanted to talk. So I do appreciate the work that they've done. And they put a stipulation on there, you know, they have to have the contact information, you know, for somebody to call if they've got a complaint. But if you have a company that doesn't really want to follow the rules and just kind of wants to throw it out there and see what sticks, you know, I'm not sure that they're going to be real responsive to anything. And once these turbines are up. They're not coming down. And I cannot support this the way this is written. Like I said, I have a whole bunch of other items here that I'll let other people, if they're going to hit them. If not, I'll hit them on round 2. But I really can't support this, because I think that this is not something that we should have.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Metzger, you are on round 1 as well.
I just have a question. We don't even have this on the floor, am I correct? It did get on the floor.
The regular motion has been moved and seconded.
All right.
It is on the floor after we went through all of our attempts
All
with
right.
the table.
Thank you.
We're back to the original motion. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Member Erickson, you're in round 2.
Yeah, thank you. I guess. You know, I'm struggling with the language. I don't know what the language should be. So I'm asking politely for help from legal to make a motion to send it back to ZBA to consider the setbacks, to consider the decibel levels. You know, I'm trying to figure out what, because those are my main concerns. I don't know what other concerns other members have. Those are my main issues. And should the motion be, I'd like to file. I'd like to make a motion to send it back to have ZBA consider Those?
That, if you're making a motion, you send it back for further consideration and you can restrict what it's to be constrained to, but that's for you guys to decide what it is that you want to limit it to or not limit it to.
As we have done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is unusual. Well, I guess we can't do it. Forget it. I was thinking about something, but it's not possible. Okay, I would make a motion that it be sent back to ZBA to consider if the setback levels can be increased and to see if the decibel, if they've complied with I remember there was some conversation about the decibel levels of the turbines, if those are in compliance with state law.
Let me see if I can help clarify. So your motion is to send it back to ZPA with a clarification on setback levels and decibel amounts.
Yeah, if we can find a position where it's a win-win for everybody, we can move it back.
I don't know if I can help you with that point.
Well, I don't know if they can either. That's all you're doing is sending it back to ask them.
There is a motion then. I'm sorry. There is a motion right now. I need a second for that motion. Member Johnson has seconded the motion to send it back to ZBA with the recommendations to consider the setback levels and the decibel amount. Any comments or questions? I have a motion second on the floor. Let's confine our discussion to the motion to send it back to ZBA with those recommendations right now with our debate, okay? So we don't get off on a tangent here as well. Member Selzer.
Just a question, if this is different than the stipulations, I mean, they've put stipulations for the decibels, et cetera, in the findings, so I'm just trying to find out if you want them other than the, what's stipulated. So, no, I was just asking Member Erickson if, because there are stipulations for some of those in the findings from the ZBA, are they to look at different findings or what? So I'm just trying to clarify, and just as a friendly point of order, while I may not agree with them, I think Member Schaefer had other things that she wanted to address too. So I don't know how we, if it is successful, how we amend it to add those other things.
Well, Member Schaefer will have to confine her discussion to the original motion at this point in time.
Thank you.
Right now, we're on a motion to send it back as well. Do you want to clarify any further, Member Erickson?
No, I just wanted to see if we could do a setback, and I'm not. And to see where we were at on the noise levels, but I acknowledge Mr. Seltzer's issue. I don't know how to specifically define that myself. I don't know, and I'm struggling with the words. You know, I mean, you know, sometimes I have that difficulty, you know, but, you know, I don't know what the word should be. So if that's where I'm at. So that's where I'm going to leave it.
Well, it's difficult to do this motion to send back without further clarification, but I'll refer staff here to see where we are legally on that as well, but since you're not sure exactly where you are with it as well. Thank you. Any other clarification up here? If not, we have a motion. We have a motion and a second to send it back to ZBA with the certain considerations. Any other comments or discussion on that motion? Member Scritchlow.
I've got a question. So if we're sending it back to the ZBA is supposed to look at it based on what our code tells them to look at. So if we're changing setbacks, wouldn't that have to be in our code then? Because we can't just say, send it back and say, pick a different setback. Aren't the setbacks in our codes? Or like same with the decibels, it refers another, an item. Can we actually be that general when we send it back?
Well, okay, go ahead.
I think you can. I mean, it might not do anything, but you can still send it back.
So we could send it back and say we want X setback or X requirement, but if it's not
I don't think you can be that specific.
Okay, thank you.
Member Murphy.
If we send this back to the ZBA, then we won't be voting on it within that 30 days, so we're going to have to open up more public hearings and do the publication and start all that over again. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I think we have that in our record this morning. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Member
Just a point of information. These two issues that Mr. Erickson is referring to, were they or were they not addressed, in sworn testimony? That's all I'm asking, were they or were they not sworn to in testimony?
Yes.
So they have been basically answered by the rules that we have established or the zoning board has established?
Yes. So,
as Mr. Sistrich, what are we going to get out of them if we send it back?
That will be up to the ZBA. And that's, I guess, the best answer I could give you on that. As far as the recommendation is to re-examine. Is that right, Mr. Erickson? Basically.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm thinking, I'm just trying to figure out what is the right language to use, Mr. Chairman. I'm struggling with it myself because I do acknowledge the possibility that we could send it back to ZBA and they may send it back to us just the way they sent it to us.
That is correct.
And so I understand that as a possibility. But as I understand the law, they could actually increase the setbacks. They have the authority to do that, don't they? If they choose.
They have the authority to make any recommendation to us that they want to rule on based on their criteria on their approval as well. Member Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also usually at a loss for words. And in this situation, I'm not. Come on, this is politics 101. When you don't think you have the votes, it's called delay. This is delay, right? And we can get angry about that. We can't even give any direction to the ZBA on what we want them to do. Well, it's about setbacks. Well, what setbacks? It's about decibel level. What's your decibel level? We don't know. Have the gall to vote up or down on the issue. That's what you were sent here to do. This has been sent to you. It's been vetted. It's come to us. Stop delaying. Let's do your job.
Okay, let's end it right now at this point in time in the debate. Member Gordon, do you have your hand up?
Like Member Rankin, I'm usually at a loss for words. Also, like Member Rankin, I don't know anything about politics 101. There was, I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if I'm in order to refer to at least one comment that was made in sworn testimony before the ZBA that has to do with setbacks. I think we can give some guidance to the ZBA if we decide to go ahead and refer back. Having to do with standards for setbacks that the ZBA set that are closer than the standards set by the Illinois Pollution Control Board. Now, we can ask them to re-examine that decision, which came to us as part of their recommendations. I'm referring to testimony from Dr. Schomer, whose testimony got my attention and continues to. So if we're going to send it back, it may or may not be simply a delaying tactic. I, for one, would like to know why the setback distances were set the way they were by the zoning board, because they are different from the standards of the Illinois Pollution Control Board. It's one of the factors one of many factors in my thinking this morning. And if there can be a further effort to secure information on that and perhaps other things, frankly, I would feel more confident in the vote that ultimately I will cast either today or when it comes back to us from ZBA, should it go that route.
Well, we are on the edge of being in and out of order here, as you know, sir. And he didn't qualify that any further in the general with his motion at this time. And I want to restrict this the best I can on the discussion and the questions of the motion as presented, which is pretty open-ended. We understand that, Member Erickson, as well. Is there any other comment on this? We still have it on the floor. Member Casely. Question has been called. Anyone else? Any discussion? Member Baird? I'm going to allow Mr. Baird, who had his hand up and in order to speak first.
One point of clarification is the 30-day clock start from February 15th when the ZBA's final approval is February 15th. So that 30-day clock starts then, right? in terms of referring it back and then later approving and needing to redo everything.
Yeah, that was a recommendation when it came out, so it'll be 30 days from that date to us, yes.
And so,
as well.
Okay, and then I guess to my colleagues, this is an important issue, and I would have no problem sending it back, maybe for the reasons Mr. Gordon stated, not necessarily the reasons Mr. Erickson stated, because the sound issue, where you're measuring from, the decommissioning plan, the definition of Henline Creek, I thought there were some questions about those things that were reasonable. If we were to send it back and then convene again within that 30 days, not triggering a whole thing, I don't think that would be unreasonable to do.
Member Beard, I'm not sure that you'd be able to send it back without referring back to ZBA for them to reinstitute the process in which they follow through. And we couldn't have them make a recommendation, come back with, until they did due diligence with that.
I think okay. Well,
you see what I mean?
I felt there were a handful of minute things that, in my mind, were questionable, and not in a protracted hearing, but in a very well-defined hearing that they could address, and then we could come back, and we did it for Brandt. I think we'd be all more than willing to have a special meeting just for that purpose ahead of the March meeting to meet that 30-day guideline.
Thank you. At this point in time, we still have the motion on the floor as such. Member Robustelli, your light's on. Did you want to speak next?
Yeah, I want to talk specifically about the two reasons for setting this back, and give my perspective on them. The first was the setback distances, and there were questions about where that came from. And I just want to remind everyone they came from the text amendments that we passed. I mean, they are in there. So there is a rationale behind that. This wasn't, and I think it's kind of, in my opinion, it puts a group of volunteers who have spent 39 hours listening to testimony, processing all of the information and interpreting our codes in a difficult position when we send something back to them and say, we want you to think about setbacks. I don't think that puts them in doesn't give them guidance, and quite frankly, I don't see how we're going to get a different result from them based on the body of testimony and information we have available. And then with regard to decimal levels, again, my understanding was the Illinois Pollution Control Board their recommendations were the basis of the decimal levels, and there is very specific, if and only if, stipulations included in the resolution that is before us. And so again, I don't see how we're going to get a different outcome out of the volunteer group ZBA if we send this back and say, we really want you to consider this further. They've done that. I mean, they've taken the best information that's available to us, they've brought it forward, and that's what we have before us. They have put explicitly the recommendations that were included by IDNR, which include decibel levels. And it is a if and only if proposition. They have to meet a certain decimal level and demonstrate that in order to get this permit. So that's why I'll be voting against the motion.
Thank you. I have a call for the question by Member Casely, and the motion to send back to ZBA with the clarification, with some recommendations to consider setback level and decibel level. As best as I could define that, Member Erickson, as what you wanted. And at that point in time, we have a question on the floor. I'm going to call for a question for the vote at this time. Any other comments or questions or objections?
Member Erickson had his hand up.
Is your hand up to speak on the clarification of the motion?
At you, but
well, thank you. I'll wave back at you.
All right, thank you. I mean, I'm willing to withdraw the motion if Member Beard or Member Gordon want to submit their motion. So I am making a motion to withdraw my motion.
All right, hang on a minute, please. All right, so the motion made to send back to ZBA by Member Erickson has been withdrawn this time. Is there a second?
I'll withdraw my second.
I know. Second. And Member Johnson has withdrawn the second. We're back to the original motion that was on the floor, which is in your packet, item D at this time. Any other further discussion on this? I have to go back and refer to my rounds here. as well. Any comments or questions at this time? Member Cavallini.
Schaefer had stated a couple things that she was concerned about, but she didn't give us her full list. I'm very curious to know about the other items that she thought about and reflected on.
This will be round 2 for you and for Mr. Schaefer, and you are on item number 4 of your list of 6. Thank you.
Can't I wait till have other people talk on what there's on their list, and then I will fill in any other blanks that may happen?
All right, thank you. Anyone else who wants to speak at this time? Ms. Metzger, this is round 2 for you, and then I think we need to get on with this debate at that point in time. Ms. Metzger, you have the floor.
I want to acknowledge the effort of our Zoning Board of Appeals. Volunteers sitting, as I did, for 39 hours, and as many of the people up in front of me did. There were a couple of things that I think are a question for me. I think that the recommendation that the company rework their model and put back in the 2 decibels that they just inadvertently took out to help them, I'm quite sure, but you know, they had justification, so they were told to put it back in and run that model. And I think that is an excellent recommendation. My problem with that is not that they run the model, but my problem is we have no one in our zoning office with the expertise to analyze that data and validate that it's accurate. We actually had, in this Rivian abatement, we had recommendations that there had to be satisfactory proof. And I think we need satisfactory proof that the companies knew, which we haven't even seen, by the way. We have no idea where it's at, and I think it's important that the county board members, as well as my constituents, know where these turbines are going to be once they get this new model completed. And I believe that we need to put a restriction or require that our zoning board, our zoning office, hire somebody with the expertise to analyze this data and validate that they do meet those setbacks. And if they meet our setbacks that are in our ordinance, then I think that's all we can ask. So that's point 1. Point 2 has to do with the IDNR. The same thing. We need to have someone analyze the data once they move these back. Consider Henline Creek as a part of the INAI site, because I'm not sure that the company has ever acknowledged that. And then also perennial creeks like Patton Creek. And I think we need, the constituents of our county deserve to have some outside source, whether it be the IDNR review it. I think someone needs to review all of these new sites. And it's not Mr. Dick, because Mr. Dick doesn't have that expertise. Lastly, I believe that I have 2 constituents that run a business that will be dangerously impacted by having turbines around them. And to remove 2, I must say thank you. Number, I believe it was 80, and number 22. But number 74, number 78, and number 23 also need to be removed, because they do not, by having those turbines there, these people cannot safely run their businesses. And if in the testimony, Mr. Thacker even said that he needed at least 3,300 feet back, and they gave him a few feet, 500 feet. I would have to look it up. But I think those need to be removed so they can run their business. And in fact, Mr. Schertz's business, the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement actually states that it should not impact aerial spraying. This will definitely impact aerial spraying. So I would have to vote in favor of this project if we were ensuring that the completed staff work and the validation was complete. If it is, then I think we by law or by our ordinance would have to approve it. So if we could do that, I could see that this would could have more votes.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Member Beard. Round two. I'm sorry, I called him Mr. Beard. You'll be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Do I have the floor?
I don't know if you could hear me. I called him Mr. Beard and then the next. Thank you. I'll move up here where you can hear.
Thanks. I'll start big and then move down. This is not a vote for or against green energy. It's a zoning vote. So I think anyone who is for this because they like turbines and the concepts of green energy, or they're against it, it's not about that. It's about zoning, it's about property rights, and it's about, in rural McLean County, the impact to neighbors. So, and as a thought exercise, I've told this to folks, like I thought, what if these were oil derricks? Like, what would our vote be? How would we be approaching this? Would everyone be on the same side? So, but back to this, so to the specifics now as we consider having also attended some and listened to all of the hearings. There are some, I think there is a wind farm here. There are, somewhere in the area, there's going to be a wind farm, whether all 117 sites, which is now closer to 106, or ultimately work out. So my vote is ultimately going to be yes for a wind farm there. With that being said, there are a handful, and I'll list what I have, and there are a handful of specific issues with some that are not specifically addressed, I felt, in the final recommendations. Really quick, the Henline Creek setbacks, and as Catherine mentioned, as an INAI site, the clarification on how the sound study was done. There's a call for a new sound study, but does the state require measurement from the middle of the property, or does the state require measurement from the property edge? If we don't follow that, we're opening ourselves, and ultimately Invenergy is opening themselves up to litigation to do that incorrectly. And then the financial assurance that what was called for was the 12-year timeline, which is more loose than some of, I'm forgetting the organization, but the agriculture impact recommended, I think, a 1, a 5, and a 6. So why ultimately what's approved here is that 12-year versus the earlier assurance? Again, that's not related to turbines specifically, but that's of, you go and you see empty factories that are falling apart because companies went bankrupt or because the times changed. And I would hate to have a decommissioning plan that could allow, as the environment changes, as the economy changes, that would leave these in place. And that's why that more aggressive plan, I believe, is out there for the state of Illinois. These are all, I believe, very specific things that do not impact the overall wind farm. It's more than reasonable for us to say, please clarify, ZBA, please look at these specific things, do that in the next couple of weeks, let us reconvene before March and vote on it. And as Mr. Cavallini said, we want it to be less divisive. I think most people here want to vote for something. So I'm not going to propose a motion. I want to hear other comments on that, but again, that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Member Segoviano, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, Vivian was mentioned just a moment ago, and I think it's prudent for the board to hear that just recently, Mr. Watson, Mr. Knapp, Mr. Casey, and myself, along with other community investors, toured that facility, and they are meeting their benchmark. They've bought a lot of new equipment and invested in that, and they're moving forward. So I think it was a win-win situation for the county board and McLean County. Back to the energy situation. I'm going to support this, and I think really for three basic reasons, I guess four. I certainly respect the time and effort that our zoning board put in on this application. Most of all, it's a move in the right direction for continued clean energy. Secondly, it's going to provide needed dollars for struggling school districts to be able to educate our kids. I think that's most important. And thirdly, landowners who have not objected to this but support it. So clean energy, protecting our schools, and protecting landowners' rights. I'm going to support that, and I hope you'll join with me in doing so.
Thank you. Member Erickson, we're on our third round here. I'm bending a little bit here. I'll let you speak one more time on this.
We're speaking ad nauseum about talking about a motion, and people get up and say, well, I've got an objection. I got to either make the motion or let's vote on it. Either make the motion.
Thank you very much.
Or
We
let's
can
vote
do
on
that.
it.
Thank you for your advice. Any other comments or questions or discussion on the motion as is in resolution as in the packet? If not, there's a question been called. Comments or questions? Member Schaefer.
I didn't see anybody jump that they wanted to say anything else, so I'll go back to Mr. Cavallini's request. But to address Mr. Beard's comments about Henline Creek, we need clarification, or to send it back to the ZBA, I'm not sure that it's going to change anybody's decision. I don't think it's going to make enough difference. And to redo the sound study. The burden of proof is on the applicant, not on the objectors. It's on the applicant. And from the comments that we've heard, the requests for clarification, the redo the sound study, they have not proven to us that they have not met the burden of proof, to me. And so the other things that I had brought up, Member Metzger brought up a couple of them, but did you talk about building and zoning, about not having the expertise to evaluate sound studies and whatnot? But building and zoning also really has no recourse. There's really no recourse if after things are built, that building and zoning is going to be able to do if somebody's going to complain. And I really think that that's an issue. I went to building and zoning and I asked about Henline Creek. And at that time, there was, the ZBA had just determined that it was only part of it. And he said that, we'd have to get a legal opinion on what that means. So where are we on that if we have to get a legal opinion, to do that? Because if you send it back to ZBA, there's a lot of unanswered and things that, to me, the burden of proof is on the applicant, and they did not prove it. I don't see what sending this back to the ZBA is going to really do.
Sorry, we're on the original motion, as you know. Okay.
Correct. So, but people are discussing, they're debating whether or not they want to make another motion to send it back to the ZBA with certain requests, and I'm not sure that they can actually, do what we're going to request. These people, would request.
Thank you. The question has been called. I don't know if any other debate is going to lend this problem or the discussion anyway. Member Metzger?
I do have a question, and that is, there are restrictions that are have been identified by the Zoning Board of Appeals, can we have additional restrictions, not to send it back, but on our zoning office to do completed staff work to validate that this is accurate?
We're discussing right now.
Before we
Yeah, I understand,
permits.
but we're talking about apples and oranges here. We're talking about putting restrictions on our zoning office. We were talking about one time the possibility of hiring advice and so on, but that's not what we're discussing at this point in time.
I think it is, though. I beg to differ.
Well, there is a process that's been followed by ZBA, and the process has also been executed by our building and zoning office. And if we require or we want to discuss or we desire a different type of a situation or process or personnel involved with our office, then I think that is a topic that we can take up at a different time. It's difficult to discuss right now. Any other comments or questions? Member Gordon, we're round two with you. We do have a question on the floor at this time.
What we have on the floor, Mr. Chairman, is the main motion, the original motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
This has been one of the toughest issues that I've ever dealt with as a member of the county board. I'm an advocate of green energy. I'm an advocate of using renewables for energy. And I'm always interested in jobs for people in the county. I'm also concerned, on the flip side, with some of the testimony given before the ZBA, and I have heard or read the testimony. And I'm coming back to, I guess, big questions. I have concerns about, I'll even go further. I'm not sure I agree that standards 1 and 2 were in fact met. And I'm reading now on pages 264 and 267. Standard number 1, the proposed special use will not be detrimental to or endanger the health, safety, morals, comfort, or welfare of the public. And I'm focusing on health, safety, and comfort in standard number 1. I have more questions and more doubt about standard number 2, that the proposed special use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for purposes already permitted, or substantially diminish property values in the immediate area. Now, like any general standards in any ordinance or code or statute, the language of necessity is general. But I think enough questions were raised during the testimony before the ZBA that I'm afraid that I've come to the conclusion that at least standard number 2 and perhaps standard number 1 weren't met. And that's where I'm coming down.
All right, thank you. I've been informed by our legal staff that a motion or an amendment to this motion with restrictions could be made. Ms. Metzger, I apologize for cutting you off that time, so I want to open that back up to you as advised here by our State's Attorney's Office.
So I would like to amend the motion to include, so we can address Member Gordon's concern about the burden of proof on number 1, number 2, and I also believe number 3 were not met. And in order to validate and confirm that they are met, I would like to amend this to include that the zoning office secure objective third parties to validate the new sound study by the wind company and their turbine placement for the wildlife piece related to the INAI sites as well as perennial creeks. And lastly, to either remove turbines 74, 78, and 23, or move them back at least 3,300 feet.
Oh, you haven't been sleeping?
So we're going to, this is a motion to approve with stipulations, and we're going to read this back so that everyone understands the language as well. Hang on. Yeah, point of order.
I want to be sure that I'm understanding this correctly. Member Metzger has made the motion to amend. It's still pending a second.
That's true.
Assuming it gets a second.
Yes,
good chance.
that's true.
Good chance. We will then have, that would be debatable, and we would need to vote to add that to the main motion.
That's true.
Before we vote on the main motion.
Absolutely. Right now, we're going to.
Right, okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Nope,
We're going to read this back to see if we've got the language correct, and then I'll entertain a second or not. Okay, thank you.
I may not have gotten all of it, but here's what I've got. To amend the motion to address concerns about standards 1, 2, and 3 were not met, and I would like to amend this motion for this office to get objective third parties to validate the sound study and their turbine placement regarding wildlife issues regarding the sites, and lastly, to remove turbines 74, 78, and 23, or move them back to at least 3,300 feet.
I did mention the
creek.
INAI and perennial creeks. INAI sites. And perennial creeks.
Does everybody understand the motion?
No.
I'm sorry.
No. But I do have a point of information. You know, she mentioned sending things back to our zoning board.
No.
I mean, our zoning office.
This motion is to approve with these stipulations. Am I correct, Ms. Metzger? Yeah, she's confirming that. Right now, I just need a second to the motion.
I will second it, Chairman.
To amend.
I will second it, Chairman.
Member Johnson has made a second to the motion to amend. As read back to you, is that all understood? Okay. We do have discussion on this, and I will open the floor. Member Sulzer and then Member Rankin.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I think that we talk about public hearings for everybody to have a fair hearing. I don't think that the Invenergy has any say in this all of a sudden, and there's new standards, and we are trying to micromanage where a tower is going to be, which I don't believe is our job. But more importantly, my concern comes from the finance side. And to echo Mr. Segoviano's thoughts, you know, we just went through some layoffs. I can wait. We just went through some layoffs. We just went through some right sizing. It was painful. And now somehow we're going to have money that's not budgeted for the staff because we have members who for some reason don't like our own zoning department and have a problem with our own zoning department, who I might add has put in the windmills 10 years ago down Route 9 very successfully with objection, put a hog farm in Bellflower that had more objections than this did for anybody that was here and went through those meetings. Talk about painful meetings. And that seems to be just an awesome operation for us. And now we're questioning their authority. And I just don't know where the money's coming from. So I want to amend the amendment to ask Mrs. Metzger to come up with the funding for these specialists and also explain why this applicant is now got a new burden of proof, a new hurdle to go through for their approval with an outside agency. I mean, it's unheard of, unheard of. Thank you.
I open this back up by advice of counsel to Ms. Metzger. Are you serious about amending this?
Where's the money coming from? We have some pretty specific.
I know,
we have some pretty
those are
specific
questions.
Right. So she's directing we are directing, if this is successful, our zoning office to go out and hire experts. And then you know what? At finance next month, Mr. Dick is going to be coming looking for money, and I just would like some direction as to where that money's coming from.
Can you state that as a response to Ms. Metzger's amendment on the floor so we can take action on it? Thank you. Is that
Yeah,
is that right?
exactly.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Discussion, Member Rankin.
Yeah, just briefly, I think from what I hear, when I hear the disagreement, not just from Member Metzger, but also from Member Gordon, of standards 1, 2, and 3, a citing of an objective study, and I don't know who gets to determine objectivity. Is that the petitioner? Is that the county? Who's the determinant? Who makes that determination of objectivity? I echo Member Selzer's comments on the financing of this. I think there are some pretty serious unintended consequences that come from this. And if you disagree with 1, 2, and 3, then you disagree with the proposal. You disagree with what came from the ZBA. So just vote against it. That's the part. I mean, throwing all of these extra stipulations on at the 11th hour when we have no expertise in these areas is really problematic to me. I don't understand. I mean, I get the reasoning behind it. I really do. And I don't think that I don't think that Member Metzger is being a bad actor here. I think that she's advocating for her constituents. But at the same time, I think that this is a real serious problem. I think that the ZBA has done their job. We've listened. We have followed. We have their recommendation. We either vote for their recommendation or not throw all these other stipulations on top of it.
There is a motion to amend on the floor. I'm going to entertain one more point, and then I'm going to call for the question on the motion as amended by Ms. Metzger, and we'll read it back for you one more time. Member Robustelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to say I really genuinely appreciate Member Metzger's trying to get to yes for her. I mean, that's what she's trying to do here, and I appreciate that. I think the tension here is while we have the legislative rights to make these kinds of amendments on the floor, that is certainly within our purview, and I wouldn't question that. I think from a governing and policymaking point of view, it makes me a bit uncomfortable. So for example, I mean, if we are considering the possibility of having additional staff or hiring someone from the outside, we, generally speaking, in the way in which we conduct business, we do that in a way that sort of understands on the front end what that's going to cost, how we're going to be able to do it, what does it mean to be objective, those kinds of things. And we did that deliberatively during our budget process when, in fact, we reduced the staff in our planning office, which I guess probably was something we should have thought more about given sort of some of these things that we knew were coming. The other thing that I find really difficult is there's a little, I mean, when you eliminate or move back 74, 78, and 23 to 3,300 feet, I'm not sure what that is referencing in terms of where we're moving those. And I also just don't know the impact of that. And so I do feel a little like I don't have all the information I would need to be able to consider this fully because I don't have all the requisite information that would come with the normal deliberative process that we have that is used by the ZBA to consider all these implications. So I won't be supporting this, motion and this change for those reasons.
I understand, and it is the 9th hour of extra information consideration. All I can suggest to is you vote on what we have presented at this time. Member Segoviano, this is
just my final remark. You know, during 30 hours of sworn testimony, those board members who were present during those hearings voiced absolutely no objection whatsoever. And here we sit today with a lot of amendments and this and that, or send it back. But they had an opportunity during the sworn testimony to give testimony, either for or against, and they chose not to do that.
I'm going to call a question here. Member Baird, do you have a comment about this question, about the amended motion?
I'm going to support the amendment. I would just point out that in the ZBA's recommendation, there are a number of items that the department recommends. Before a permit is issued. So even as originally presented, there was going to be follow-up, which may have required an expert or would have required some level of review to do. So to add some additional modifications that addresses a lot of concerns, to me is a friendly amendment, and I'm supporting it.
I'm going to have the clerk read back the amendment to the motion. We're going to vote on the amendment first. Okay. And so I want everybody to hear it one more time, and then I'm going to call the question. I'll have a roll call vote. Thank you.
We edited a little bit, so see if this is correct. To amend this motion for the Building and Zoning Office to get objective third parties to validate the sound study and turbine placement regarding the wildlife studies for clarification, regarding the sites concerning the INAI and perennial creeks, and lastly, to remove turbines 74, 78, and 23, or move them back at least 3,300 feet from the runways.
Can I clarify? You said
Yes, sir.
parties, multiple?
I'm sorry, this is a point of clarification?
Yes. She said parties, third party? Just singular. Thank you.
Okay, we have that.
Get an object.
Okay, this is a roll call vote only on the amendment at this point in time, as presented by Ms. Metzger. A yes is in favor of the amendment as was read to you. A no is not in favor.
Don Cavallini? Yes. Chuck Erickson?
Yes.
George Gordon? No. Mark Johnson?
Yes.
Randall Martin?
Yes.
Catherine Metzger?
Yes.
Scott Murphy?
No.
Eric Rankin?
No.
Carlo Robustelli? No. Susan Schaefer?
No.
Ryan Scritchlow?
Yes.
Paul Segabiano?
No.
David Seltzer?
No.
James Solner?
No.
George Wendt?
Yes.
Josh Barnett?
No.
Jacob Beard?
Yes.
William Casely?
No.
We have 8 yeses and 10 noes, and so the motion to amend has failed. We'll go now to the regular motion as presented in your packet. Any other further comments or discussion on the regular motion? Item D. If none, we'll take a roll. I'm sorry, Member Erickson.
Thank you. Yeah, now that we're actually talking about the actual motion, I just wanted to express it. I'm not going to support it, but the reasons for that is because I don't think it meets some of the recommendations that are required that the zoning board has. And so I think that I believe very strongly, and I get to decide the credibility of the people who testify just as anybody else does. I believe Dr. Schomer was a very credible witness, and I don't think a lot of his testimony was taken into consideration by the ZBA. But I do want to add this. I mean, we're told this is Politics 101. Politics 101 is trying to find a balance to see if we can still find a way to save it and try to bring other people's concerns in. So that is Politics 101, and so that is permissible here. I mean, this isn't a college course. I don't need to be instructed on Politics 101.
But that's what we do. And, so we do try to find amendments so people can see if we can find a way to save the project and still balance out the concerns of the people out there. That's what everybody was trying to do today. And so that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The motion's on the floor, and there's questions. We're going to take a roll call vote. No more discussion at this time. Absolutely, we're going to vote yes in favor of the resolution that is in your packet and a motion to approve. A yes is to approve. Again, a no is to not approve. Deny.
Okay. Don Cavallini? No. Chuck Erickson?
No.
George Gordon? No. Mark Johnson?
No.
Randall Martin?
Yes.
Catherine Metzger?
No.
Scott Murphy?
Yes.
Eric Rankin?
Yes.
Carla Robustelli?
Yes.
Susan Schaefer?
No.
Ryan Scritchlow?
Yes.
Paul Segabiano?
Yes.
David Seltzer?
Yes.
James Soldner?
Yes.
George Wendt?
No.
Josh Barnett?
Yes.
Jacob Beard?
Yes.
William Casely?
No.
We have 10 ayes and 8 noes, and the motion is carried. We'll move on. Property Committee report, Chairman Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the essence of time, we have no items for action. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Report of County Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing for the board this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Other business and communication, Member Sollner.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to mention, we are planning to have a Rules Committee, a CDAP Committee, and a Legislative Committee in the near future. When those dates and times are set, we'll make sure to make people aware of that.
Thank you. I have bills to pay. These have been reviewed and recommended for approval by the auditor in the amount of $3,349,479.11. There's a motion by Member Barnett, second by Member Segoviano. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. We will pay the bills, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, George.
Thank you, Mr. Wendt.